Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our brand new series, Unported Playlist, where we take a look at some of my favorite arcade games that never got ported home. First off, we're taking a look at Warrior Blade, Rastan Saga Episode 3. It's the third game in the Rastan series, and I have a little bit of a personal connection with this one. There is a ski mountain in Vermont named Okemo, and there's a place we used to go and drink beer and eat pizza after we skied called Village Pizza, and they had this cabinet on the floor. And I think I probably spent more money playing Rastan sometimes than I actually did eating the pizza. This to me is like one of those nostalgic perfect games. Now, is it actually perfect? No, probably not. It's really competent, really good beat 'em up, but it's not something on the like of like Streets of Rage, something like that. But the really interesting thing is that this works on a two-screen setup. So when you were looking at the arcade cabinet, you were going to be seeing that there were two screens side by side. Now, I have no idea how this actually ended up at a Village Pizza, because as far as I can tell, they say that this was never ported out of Japan, but I 100% played this, and I was in my 20s, so trust me, I wasn't a kid thinking I played it. But anyways, taking a look at the game itself here, we're on to the second stage here, and there's this massive verticality to everything. So sometimes you're scrolling left, sometimes you're scrolling right, sometimes you're riding a dragon and going up on the stages, and you do have a little bit of freedom as to what stage you take on first. Now, there are a good ending, and there is a bad ending to the game, and I definitely get the bad ending in this, even though you won't see the ending, but I will upload a full playthrough at the end of the season. That way you can check the whole thing out if you want. Graphically, it looks really good. It was released in 1991, so for a game in 91, it definitely has a nice look to it. I will say that some of the enemies that you're going to be fighting are going to become repetitive. Now, they might get new weapons, but they're going to be the same sprites with slight variations. But otherwise, for 1991, this was definitely impressive. As far as the Rastan series is concerned, the first game was awesome, the third game that you're watching right here is awesome, and the second one wasn't very good at all. I don't know what happened on that one. They just kind of like lost the thread of what Rastan was supposed to be. I played the PC Engine version, and not only is it not that fun, it's also horrendously ugly compared to what the PC Engine could do. I mean, granted, the biggest hook of this was that it did use the two-screen setup, so even if you did want to collect something like this, it would be very difficult to use in the home. But granted, this is Unported Playlist, so it never actually was ported. But even if you had the arcade board and you hooked up two PVM monitors or two TVs, the bezels on the left and the right would be so massive that you really wouldn't have a cohesive image going across. So in this instance, using emulation, you're able to put those two images together and everything works seamlessly. And that is definitely how I recommend playing this. Unless you absolutely want to go out and buy a dedicated Rastan 3 cabinet, emulation is going to be the best bet. I mean, hey, if you love the game and you can find a cabinet and it's not that expensive, I would definitely buy it because it's probably rarer than rare these days. But honestly, a lot of this playlist is going to be emulation is best because that's how I'm playing all of these. I don't own any of the games in the Unported Playlist category. They're just things that I remember playing, or if I wanted to play some of the best games I think never came over to any home consoles. But, I mean, it's a great game. You got all of these different sprites going around. You have a little bit of like, it looks like a pseudo 3D effect on those dragons or hydras, whatever you really want to call them. I think they're their own particular enemy. But when you kill them, the skull dissolves and you get all that nice blood and gore. Definitely a lot of love went into making a game like this. And now that we've gotten through the first level, we're able to pick which way we want to go next. And I do like that non-linear fashion in games like this where you can actually play in different directions and check different things out. And you even get this area right here where you're sliding down the mountain and attacking enemies. It's kind of almost like an auto-scroller, except you do have more freedom of movement and you do have some obstacles you need to avoid. It can feel a little cheap at times. Sometimes the indicators when there's an obstacle coming up don't appear until the very bitter end where you're basically going to take damage. It's kind of got a lot of that Battletoads feel to it where you really have to memorize everything or else you're going to get hit. But in the instance of an arcade game, getting hit and losing is costing you money, so I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it's not the most gracious game ever as far as trying to take your quarters is concerned. What I'll let you do is watch a little bit more of Rastan here so you can get a little bit of the soundtrack. It is quite good, and I'll come back and finish out the video and talk a little bit more about Warrior Blade Rastan Saga Episode 3. Short of that, enjoy the fight. I do love the little bits of story that we get in between stages, and interestingly enough, they're both in English and Japanese, as you can see, and that's what still confuses me about this, is that everything I read said, as I said earlier, that this never left Japan, but they definitely had a cabinet of it in Vermont. But, I mean, looking at this, it kind of definitely still has that Battletoads feel to me. You're going to see a little bit of those recycling enemies, but all the movement, all the attacks definitely feel like they hit. The controls on this game are really fluid, so ease of play is a huge thing. And I definitely recommend that you guys do check this game out, because I think it's one of the better beat-em-ups in arcades, especially things that aren't talked about. I mean, you hear beat 'em ups, you're going to hear The Revenge of Death Adder, and trust me, no playlist about unported arcade games would be complete without playing that, and that will be coming up. But I think this game is as good, even if I can't really figure out how to get down this chain. That really confused me, took me a second. I left it in just to see kind of the confusion when you're playing these games. But if you take a look at these enemies here, you're going to see that we've seen them before. Those guards and those jaguar alligator enemies, or maybe they're just alligators, they look like jaguars to me. You've seen them before. And I would say that that's this game's weak suit. All the stages are diverse and different. You know, all the music is pretty good. But when you get to the enemy sprites, you're really going to see a lot of reuse. And then, you know, a lot of the bosses, their sprites are decently sized, but nothing huge. But I do think the big hook on this game was that they were using the dual screen monitor. And that's something that, you know, Taito, however you want to pronounce it, was working at, but we didn't really get too much from that. But I mean, they even still do that with Darius Burst, Chronicle Savior. You had that ultra-wide cabinet, so it's something that they as a company really enjoyed doing. And now you have this kind of Ganesh-looking boss here, and you have these different bone dragons coming out. Definitely get some Castlevania vibes. If you told me that this was a Castlevania stage, I might kind of believe you when you said it. But that's kind of what Rastan Saga III is. I mean, I definitely really enjoy this game. I think it's one of the better arcade beat-em-ups on the platform, and it's definitely something that I think you should play for sure. So what you see here is we've passed 2 of those stages, and we have gotten some items in them. But how the game basically works is you get certain power-ups or certain artifacts per stage, depending on how you do, and depending on what of those artifacts you get, you're going to get a different ending. Now, the ending I got in this is I did beat the game, but Rastan never became king, and he goes out to try to find his own island to set up his own kingdom. So there's definitely multiple endings. And the game's pretty long, so you're definitely, if you don't get it right the first time, you're going to be playing another 40 minutes to try to get it right. I do like these little additions here. You get this wizard when you pick up the magic, and he can do his own attacks, but you have to hit him. There isn't a button. I kind of got confused because it's been a long time since I played it, but you have to actually basically attack the wizard, and that will force him to attack your enemies. And you will see that coming up here in a moment. It's a pretty fun mechanic, something that I haven't seen in a while. It's kind of like when you have to hit the little gnomes in some games. What game am I thinking of right now? Golden Axe, exactly. Where you have to hit the gnome and the magic comes out. It kind of functions the same way here, except you hit your assistant and the magic comes out. You'll get meteors, you'll get freezing breath, you're able to shatter those enemies, so it's a pretty decent component. But interestingly, you can't bring that into a boss fight, so you definitely want to make sure you utilize it on the stages wherever you can, because it is going to help you better play the game. I do like these backgrounds here too. They feel a little flat, but the art's good enough that you get that depth, and you have a little bit of parallax scrolling in those clouds there. The game doesn't have a ton of parallax, but considering that it was done in 91, I would say that it's pretty impressive for its time. I mean, if you're playing something, you know, on the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis in 91, it definitely didn't look this good. Granted, they could both do parallax scrolling, but you weren't going to be getting these giant sprite bosses and all the different graphical effects that you're getting in something like Rastan Saga III here. And I do like that enemy, just sort of like a bone dragon skeleton. He's got one human skull, he's got one animal skull. Definitely a lot of fun to look at. And I would say that they did a great job art-wise on this. There's all those skeletons on the ground there, and you get a lot of different sort of flavor bits that really make the Rastan world feel like it's a living, breathing place, in as so much as anything with large alligators and mesas can feel like a real place you visited, which is to say, not at all. But hey, if you could visit a place where there was alligators holding maces, I might check it out. It seems kind of interesting. And here are those same enemies again, and like I said, great game, absolutely recommend it. Really nice visual style, great music, great gameplay. The one downside is just the overuse of the same sprites from stage to stage to stage. They slightly change, but not enough so you kind of start feeling like you're just playing a little bit of a repetitive game. But like I said, I don't really know why this isn't one that's talked about near as much as something like The Revenge of Death Adder. Granted, that game is subjectively better and I enjoy it more, but I really still really enjoy this game to the point where it's on my playlist of my 10 favorite unported arcade games. And of course, when anyone picks a top 10 list, my opinions are going to vary wildly from somebody's. You may think that all 10 of the games I'm going to pick are your 10 favorites, and you might think that my taste absolutely is miserable compared to yours. But that's kind of how these things are. Everyone's favorite games are subjective. But overall, I really love this game. I highly recommend you play it. I used Final Burn Alpha to emulate this, and it worked perfectly fine. But that's Rastan Saga III. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. I am recording this while I am under stay-at-home orders for the COVID-19 virus, so if you heard anything in the background, my dog's home, my wife's home. Hopefully you didn't hear them, but I hope you're all staying safe and healthy out there, and by the time you listen to this, everything's back to normal. But we'll be back on Tuesday with another entry in our mainline series, as well as a video on Friday. But short of that, that was Rastan Saga III. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you next time. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.